Hello, everyone. This is Jason White, and this is our third ISO podcast. We're technically still on our summer break, fun in the sun, but we did watch the Indianapolis 500, the 2020 edition, delayed because of COVID, and we wanted to share our analysis and our thoughts on said race. And joining me for this podcast is Richard Coxon. Richard, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Yeah, and actually, Richard and I were watching the race at the same time, maybe 15 seconds delay apart. And he and I were messaging back and forth on WhatsApp. Now, Richard, you mentioned to me before, this was your first time watching the 500 live in your country. Is that true?
Yes, as a complete entity, so pre-show, start of the race, middle, end.
So,
as a complete thing, yeah, it was.
So is it not common to have a complete run of the broadcast there, or you only get highlights, or was it just this time you planned to watch it?
Just this time I planned to watch it. For the past few years, I've seen... Last year I watched nothing. I think the last one I watched a portion of was the Alonso race, the first time he entered. Other than that, I'd not watched any Indy 500 racing.
Well, this will be interesting because we have a person who's watched all of them since I've been a child, like most of them live on television. And you're coming from an outsider perspective, more or less. So there's two different points of view for sure. Those of you who have watched the race, no surprise, we're going to reveal to you, of course, but Sato was the winner, his second Indy 500 title. And it didn't look like that's what was going to happen for a lot of the race, but we're going to go through like the various things that happened during the race. Obviously, the big banner headline to start with was that there were no fans, nobody in the facilities other than the media, the drivers, and the teams, and the IndyCar officials. I wasn't personally surprised that there were no fans there. What about you, Richard?
Didn't surprise me at all. It seemed risky to even think about having fans there. When it first started surfacing, we're going to have a limited capacity, I just instantly thought, well, I don't think this will go ahead.
Yeah, I had the same feeling. I just was like, I didn't see how logistically it would work because I've been there and I know how closely confined the spaces are where the in the grandstands, and I was scratching my head thinking, I don't know how they're going to make this feasible.
The only thing I saw online was where the benches are. They had a sticker: sit here, don't sit here, sit here, don't sit here. And then on the row behind it was staggered with the row preceding.
Yeah.
Where you had two don't sit here stickers behind them was a sit here sticker. So but I don't think it'd work. Can you really see people sticking to a sticker?
Well, no, that's the challenge right there, is you can make all the rules you want, but are people going to actually follow them? That's the thing that I was concerned about. But in any case, it was a moot point because it didn't happen. The race got underway. The front row was a very interesting front row with Marco Andretti on the pole, Dixon in the middle, and Sato on the outside. Now, I've told you before and other friends of mine, I am not the biggest fan of Sato for the simple reason that I think his mantra of no attack, no chance is dangerous, and that he's caused a lot of accidents over the years simply because he was going for every piece of daylight that he could see, between cars. And I can think of certain races where it was out of control, and it had it was situations like 500-mile races where it was on a start. Like, for example, there was one Indy 500 where he tried to go 3 wide on the outside into the short chute on lap 1. I don't know when it's ever a good idea to go 3 wide into a short chute on any lap in Indianapolis, let alone lap 1. And he caused an accident and took a couple of cars out with him. And then there was the famous incident at Pocono last year where he tried to go 3 wide on the outside going into the tunnel turn, which, again, I don't I fail to see any scenario where that's a good idea. And he called it a racing incident after the fact, which just made my blood boil, because no, it's not a racing incident. You made a poor choice. So having him start on the front row was scary to me, because I'm like, I really hope we don't see something like that. And lo and behold, when they're coming down for the green flag, he actually lags back a bit, and didn't. He actually wasn't up with Dixon and Andretti at the start, and only Sato really knows what he was doing there. Whether he was lagging back on purpose or something. But what was your take on that?
Well, I think he's probably learnt from errors of his ways in previous races. I know during the broadcast it was mentioned that he'd said he'd changed his approach. He no longer had that no risk, no chance attitude.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when I saw that happen, my ears perked up. I'm like, oh, interesting. He didn't go for it on that start. I mean, and it would have been very tempting to do so, because you're in an ideal spot on the outside there. I've seen many 500 starts where the guy who starts third is able to sweep across and take the lead. And he didn't really take that opportunity. Whatever. I mean, it could be that he was just like, okay, I'll just hang back and let this develop and see what happens. But in any case, he wasn't really a factor in the start. Dixon just swept around and took the lead, which I think everybody was probably expecting. I was suspicious that the Andretti hype would kind of die down after the start, but I was kind of surprised at how little of a factor he was throughout a lot of the race. What was your reaction to that?
Yeah, he sort of dropped like a stone in the first stint.
Yeah.
I know they said at the first stop he'd had handling issues, but he never seemed to really recover from it. So whether it was a mix of dirty air, or they just never got on top of the car issues, or was it just simply the fact they wanted a bit of glory on the qualifying day?
Well, I think a lot of people had handling issues in the first stint, because you saw a lot of them come in at the very first opportunity when there was a yellow.
Mm.
And something that people who don't watch the 500 regularly should understand is that the last real practice they have is on the Friday before they race, carburation day, and it's a situation where they don't have a lot of track time. They had a little bit of time after they qualified, but there wasn't a lot of time to get the car used to being in a race trim situation. The other thing that has been mentioned with these cars this year in particular, and maybe the aero screen edition has something to do with it, but they're much more sensitive to setup. It's like tuning a violin with these cars, and that finding that sweet spot is harder than it was last year. So I wasn't surprised when I saw a lot of cars come in on the first opportunity. The first actual yellow occurred on lap 6, and that was when James Davison's wheel exploded. You saw that on TV, I'm sure. It was a pretty dramatic moment.
Yeah, the whole wheel effectively ignited.
Yep. The interesting thing about that, though, was that, well, it's weird that the right front brake would lock on like that. I don't know what happened there, but in any case, as he's coming down the back straightaway, they showed it in slow motion. The wheel explodes, and you could see big, giant chunks come off the wheel going in all directions. And if you look closely, one of those big chunks bounces right off the aero screen. So there you go.
Already proving its worth.
Already proving its worth. It saved him from serious injury, possibly worse. It had a trajectory that would have taken it right into the cockpit, this giant piece of the wheel. So, and it was like a projectile from a gun practically. And the cockpit held up, the screen held up. And I think that's fantastic to see. Later on, we saw effects of dirty air and what it would do to cars and traffic. On lap 25, Ericsson got loose and hit the wall. Interesting thing there is that it looked like he almost caught it, but then he pancaked the wall on the right with the right-hand side of the car. It was actually similar to the accident that Rossi had later on, but it looks as if from the way the cars were behaving and the way the drivers were reacting, when the car just busts loose, it busts loose, and you really don't have a lot of warning in this series. I mean, is that the impression you got?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, you mentioned Rossi and Ericsson, they were both mid-pack. They were potentially setting the cars up to be able to follow in the dirty air. So the potential for snapping is increased. But you get out into those marbles, and the car's just gone effectively as well. So
And the drivers do have tools in the cockpit to adjust. They have the weight jacker. They have obviously front and rear sway bars that they can adjust. But there's only so far they can go with the car. And after a while, it's there's not much more they can do. But I know, I mean, it was disappointing that Ericsson had that moment and hit the wall, because he probably was one person who could have contended for a good spot at the end. Some interesting, strange things happened. Strange and interesting things happened later on. Lap 63, Rossi misses the pit entrance, which I think what was probably going on there, I think it was somebody called it on the broadcast, and I agree. He was trying to do a hot in lap to make up time, and probably overachieved on the exit of the corner and couldn't get the car slowed down fast enough. Because I've seen firsthand what happens when you misjudge going into the pits, because you're trying to hit a mark that's very specific, and if you don't hit it right, you could run over somebody, or that definitely cost him a few seconds. He had to make a split decision of like, do I try to go for the pits or do I keep going? And he kept going. Then there was a classic incident not long after that of washout. Colette was trying to pass Hanley. He goes on the inside. He didn't have enough momentum to get up alongside Hanley. And Hanley cuts down to the inside, takes the apex, and Colette is suddenly faced with a wall of dirty air off the back of Hanley's car, and Colette's car just sails right up into the gray. It was one of the most classic washout accidents I'd ever seen. And a lot of it probably speaks to Colette's lack of experience, but it shows just how quickly that dirty air can send you up into the gray and then out of the race.
Yeah, it's the curse of modern racing cars. They are so aero dependent, and you suddenly take a good portion of that aero away, and they don't work.
Yeah, it's really that simple. The incident that got a lot of attention and really it sparked a lot of comparison in my head with incidents from the past was on the restart in lap 92 when Conor Daly spun his car coming off of the turn 4. It looked like he got his left front on the concrete on the bottom, and that induced the spin. He spins around. Then behind him, Askew is coming through the corner, and everybody in front of him is checking up. And he checks up, and evidently that caused him to spin. And he does a kind of a he didn't hit the wall quite with the back end of the car. It was more of a pancake hit on the side, which probably was better. But I think playing into that was the fact that the tires were probably cold. But as soon as he checked up, he lost control of the car. And I watched the replay. It happened so fast. He had almost no time to react. He took it. The remarkable thing is, right before he hits the wall, I watched the replay. He takes his hands off the wheel. He had the presence of mind to do that, even when it was that quick of a loss of control. So, pretty impressive. But it was an interesting chain reaction accident that we don't see as often anymore. But definitely another thing it illustrated there was the safer barrier on that inside wall, because you can probably think of a couple instances where there have been accidents like that before, where you spin coming off of 4 and then hit the inside wall, and the results have not been good, to put it mildly.
Yeah. Like two spring to mind for me.
Which are those?
One's obviously the Sweet Savage accident, and the other one, I can't remember the driver it was. Was he in the Thompson special?
Oh, you're thinking of Dave McDonald, Eddie Sachs, 64.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, very.
Um,
Although I will say this, the difference between those accidents and what we saw in this one is that those were at full speed. These were at coming back from a yellow, so they likely weren't at full speed.
yeah.
That's the difference. But yeah, there's similar dynamics going on there. Cars full of fuel and probably not quite, with tires not quite up to temperature, probably.
Yeah, I think Askew admitted himself that he braked too hard and it locked the car up.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe he still had some steering input. So if you brake
Mhm.
heavily with too much steering input, it will just balance the car and send it round.
Yeah. It's sad, too, because Askew showed that he had some excellent speed.
Yeah, we're looking promising.
He was looking really good. So was Award in certain parts. That's the interesting part, is that the McLaren Schmidt-Peterson team, those two cars, the Papaya and Black cars, number 5 and number 7, were actually very competitive. And Alonso was not in the 66. And he was mired in traffic most of the time. It was really a non-event for him in a lot of ways.
Yeah, he posted on Instagram when he was leaving the circuit that he never had balance in the car, which is also key around Indy. And as we discussed through WhatsApp, he lost the clutch on one of the pit stops near the end.
No, you
But
don't
that
want to lose
doesn't
the
help.
clutch. No, it makes leaving the pits really difficult. But yeah, I mean, it's too bad because that's the last we're going to see of him at the Speedway for a while, or maybe ever again. I don't know,
Well,
because his Renault contract specifies that he cannot run the Indy 500 the next 2 years. So we won't see him back anytime soon.
I think Renault's scared to lose any more drivers after Robert Kubica's accident in 2010.
Yeah, there's something of that. Anyway, so then let's see. Lap 103, Rossi actually ends up taking the lead. This was the part of the race where, up until this point, it was basically the Scott Dixon show.
Yeah.
He was out front doing fantastic laps and just seemed to have the race in the palm of his hand. Then Rossi asserted himself. And it looked like, okay, now we've got a race in our hands here. And to be fair, I think Dixon probably let Rossi take the lead because he was looking to save a bit of fuel. The cars evidently use up a lot more fuel when they're running by themselves, like out in front, than they do when they're in a tow.
Yeah.
But then a very critical moment occurred in the race during a pit stop when everybody was in the pits and it was very crowded, admittedly. Rossi's team sends him out of the pit box, and there's two cars doubled up, in both lanes coming really quickly. And Rossi glances against Takuma Sato's car.
Mm.
So, which, we've seen incidents like this happen in the past. I mean, certainly at the Indy 500 and also at other races where you send a car out and there's another car that's occupying the same space and there's a bit of a bit of contact that occurs. A lot of times there's near misses, but IndyCar decided that because Rossi's car was released in the manner it was, they thought it was unsafe and they sent him to the back. Was it too much punishment for what actually happened? What did you think of that call? Because it's controversial to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's helped the fact Sato's, I believe he was 1 or 2 stalls back.
I'm not sure where his stall was in relation to Rossi's, but
so he was coming out slightly before Rossi, so he's obviously going to be on that inside lane.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could say it is an unsafe release, but then you could say, well, you can't be waiting forever to release your car, and it wasn't as though we released it directly into the path of another car. Sato was marginally alongside when it was released. It was harsh, but if that's what the rules say, then you must give that penalty. But it was a shame because it deprived us of another contender for the win.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing, because then after that, when they came back to green, we were treated to Rossi rocketing up through the path, the pack, and he made this incredible change of direction in the back straight. He tried to go in the inside to pass a bunch of cars, realized it was jammed up, went to the outside, and then passed like 4 or 5 cars going into turn 3. It was amazing.
Yeah.
One of the most amazing uh, changes of direction, like late changes of direction I've seen in a race like that. So he's got the red mist. He's coming up through the pack. About at the same time, another driver had a problem. Pagano actually had contact with Ryan Hunter-Reay's car. Just one of these strange things where the closure rate was a bit faster than he was expecting, and he glances off the right rear with his left front, and that essentially ended any chance he had to repeat. But to be fair, other than Newgarden, well, actually, Pagano did lead at one point during the day, but other than that and Newgarden asserting himself late, Penske's cars never really were in the hunt for this race, which is strange because
I wonder how much of a factor the Chevrolet engine plays in it.
I think you just put your finger on a very important topic because, yeah, a lot of if you look at the qualifying order, it was obvious that the Hondas have more grunt on the big super speedways. So yes, I think that's. I wouldn't be surprised if you see Penske make a switch to Honda engines or something, down the line. Hey, it's when Penske suffers a defeat like this or something doesn't go the way it's supposed to, usually he comes back the following year with a major adjustment. And suddenly everybody else is like on the other end of the scenario. So I wouldn't be surprised if something happens in response to this here as far as the Chevy engine and the power it has. Anyway, then lap 144, Rossi is out of the race. And this is him, trying to get back what he lost. And he gets caught up in the dirty air and crashes. And he was clearly disappointed. Got out of the car. Actually, he accused Sato of blocking on restarts, which I, to be perfectly honest, did not see. I wasn't looking for it. But he was pretty upset, obviously, because he thought that I'm sure he thought the penalty that the team was assessed was not fair or was too harsh for the situation.
Yeah, I think, like you say, he's driving with the red mist. He had an accident, your adrenaline's at 200%, and you see things. I'm not saying he's wrong in what he says with Sato's driving, but just when everything's to the max and then you get out of the car and you get a camera shoved in your face and you're expected to answer questions,
yeah,
you
I
might not
agree.
see things in the clearest sense.
No, I absolutely agree. That's because you're still trying to adjust, back to you're coming back down to earth in a lot of ways, and still. And so then about lap 157, Sato takes the lead, and this is the interesting part because he takes the lead. His car is and a lot of people point out, he's called the wild thing. He does a lot. He's done a lot of crazy things over the years. He drove this race very much saving the car and didn't do anything crazy most of the way. So his no attack, no chance mantra really doesn't apply to this race. He was very cagey, very measured in the way that he approached this race compared to the way he usually drives. And then when it really counted, he got out and took the lead. Now, the point that a lot of people debate is how much of it was Dixon letting him go and saying, I'll get him later.
Well, Dixon was fully under the impression that Sato wouldn't have enough fuel. Hence why he let him go.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, we'll not know, really, because of the yellow at the end.
Yeah.
But I believe he did. I don't think you'd be setting those sort of lap times before a few laps before the yellow when they got to that traffic. if you were potentially going to run out of fuel. I think
Yeah.
Sato was probably drove sensibly in reserve, saving the fuel he needs to make a push at the end. Then they've got to that point and they've said, right, you're clear now for fuel. And that's when he's gone. So
Yeah, it could. I mean, the whole premise, at least based on what I've read, is that Dixon said he had pitted a lap prior, so he figured that was going to be the difference. I don't know. I mean, one lap versus another, it's strange. I mean, obviously Dixon wasn't expecting what happened at the end, but I just find it strange that he would leave him that much room at the end and be that, I don't want to say complacent, but just, maybe the fact that he had been leading most of the day fooled him into thinking that he could just reel him in like easily, or I don't know. But in any case, the accident at the end with Piggott hitting the pit attenuator, thankfully he was okay. The If you watch the replay, the impact, the sound of the impact when it hits the attenuator is really jarring. It is one of the hardest impacts I've heard in a while. And the thing that really annoys me, and it annoys me probably more than you because I'm a purist, Indy 500 guy, and there are all these people saying they should red flag the race and do a sprint to the finish. I'm like, no, this is not NASCAR. No, stupid. That is not what. And everybody's saying it's a controversial fit. No, it's not a controversial finish. Stop it. I'm like, I just wanted to say to all these fans, sit down and be quiet. You don't know what you're talking about. It just really annoyed me because no, there's 3 laps to go. He's destroyed the pit attenuator. You cannot simply put that back together in 5 minutes. And even if you can, what are you going to do? Run 1 lap under yellow and then release them and go? I mean, they made the right call.
Yeah, I think if they did restart the race, it could have just potentially led to more accidents. And
yeah, exactly, because the cars would have cooled off by then and people would have been out of rhythm. I don't know. They made the right call. I just think anybody who says that it was a controversial finish really needs to open a history book and look at, I mean, there are 15 other instances where the race finished under yellow. It happens. It's not fun. It's not the best outcome, but it's fair. I mean, Sato deserves that win. He drove beautifully. He was in the right place at the right time. And if Dixon were leading at that point and the yellow came out, I don't think they'd be saying, "Hey, let's throw the red flag and have a sprint." When the shoe's on the other foot, I don't think they would say that. So,
yeah, I think it's well, that's a fair point. I mean, didn't you were Frank Kitty's Indy wins come end under yellow?
Yeah, it did.
But there were nothing ever said then.
No, there have been a bunch of 500s that have ended under a yellow flag, and no one says anything. It's just the climate in which we're racing these days. It's kind of an outgrowth of what NASCAR has done. They've broken the races into stages, and they have green white checkers and all this stuff. And someone said recently that they're like the pro wrestling of motorsport, and that's pretty much what they are. Unfortunately, I actually watch ARCA more these days because they don't have those silly stages. So
yeah, I just disagree with those stages completely. I don't know many people that agree with that.
I think it's
style.
I think it's just people with short attention spans can't watch a 500-mile race. It's stupid.
Well, go watch rallycrossing.
Exactly, or watch NHRA. That only lasts a few seconds. That ought to suit you just fine.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so I mean, Sato takes the win. He's going to have his face on the Borg Warner Trophy another time. He was clearly really happy, and on a personal note, it was probably really gratifying for him because he's basically removed from his family right now. He can't go home to Japan and see his family. And I talked to my brother after the fact, because he lives in Tokyo, and he said, "Yeah, this is big news here." And Sato's going to be something of a folk hero there going forward. So
He deserves it. He drove a good race, in my opinion.
No, he really did. He's matured a great deal. I think it'll be interesting to see how his driving matures further towards the end of the season and next year, because he's back with a team that's very competitive. Ray Hall, Letterman, Lanigan. It was also nice to see David Letterman with his big beard on the.
Yeah,
because I'm a huge Letterman fan. I've watched his show a lot over the years. So, and he's a huge racing fan, obviously from Indiana. So he is now a winning owner in the race. So
yeah.
So yeah, I mean that was a really exciting 500, and it was fun actually to watch it with Coxon and message back and forth. It was almost like being there, not quite, but thanks for the company. It was fun.
No, it was enjoyable for me. It was another. It was like it was like you were sat next to me, and you're just watching it with a friend. So.
Yep. All right. Well, before we go, we probably could mention to everybody. We're coming off of our summer break, so we've got the Italian Grand Prix coming up on the 6th of September, and then the following week we have the Schaefer 500. So there's a bunch of good stuff coming up. And in both of those events, there are cars that are available. So if you haven't raced with us before and you'd like to try it, there's going to be plenty of opportunity in the month of September. So go over to the main website is internationalsimracing.org. There's also a link on our YouTube channel to go to the forum itself, have a look around, see if you want to take part in the Italian Grand Prix or perhaps do some oval racing and try to handle the washout that we've been talking about in a digital sense. So, all right. Well, thanks a lot for your time, Richard. It was a good recap and I think a pretty evenly balanced analysis of the race.
Yep. My pleasure as always.
All right. So for Richard, this is Jason White saying so long, and we'll see you on our next podcast, and we'll see you on our broadcasts and on the racetrack. Take care of yourselves, everyone.